Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about a wonderful novel called Snitchland by Tim Mulligan. Illustrations are by Pyrink, and it's an absolutely wonderful book to be able to read. Sit down, it'll take you maybe an hour or two. What it is it's a story of real events, real life, and real things that are happening in the world around us. Are we living in a type of cosmic sleep, so to speak, and we're just like playing out this, what everybody calls this illusionary matrix? Perhaps we are all zombies just kind of walking through and letting everything around us control us, have an effect on us, but we're just kind of just going through things like we're all sleepwalking. It's very difficult to be able to say, what is going on in my life? Who has control? Do I have free will? What is this really all about? What if I speak up? What if I share what's going on around me? What's going to happen to me? I think it's really about what happens when our sense of safety and security in this world, in this human vehicle body, in this place in which we land in the world, is at risk. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us to talk about your book, Snitchland.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you because just as I shared with you before the show, I live in New Orleans. You open a window, beautiful day out, and all of a sudden, 2 seconds later, the whole house smells like chemicals. And you're going, where is this from? Which plant is descending upon me today? You know, I think we as humans say we come to accept that which is around us, and we don't even think twice about it. Perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the conceit of this book, actually. I mean, it's all about, when you do have situations like that happening, do you speak up or do you just kind of live with it and roll through it? I think that's kind of the idea behind Snitchland.
I look back at the years and the decades. I distinctly remember it was, I think, in the late 90s. I was out in California, and I was looking for a new place to have my new medical office, and I found this great office, and I said, I think I'll take this one. And my son was with me, and he says, look at the lady next door, and it was Erin Brockovich's office right next door. And I'm thinking, this would be awesome, And at that time, the movie hadn't been out yet, and she wasn't popular yet, or maybe it didn't cross my path. And I think about it. She was pretty much the one we think about in the world who spoke up to be able to get results. But don't you think there are many times people want to say, I'm going to speak up, but they want to hand off the baton versus getting anything done?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the plight of the whistleblower and someone who comes forth and, when I wanted to write this story about this real place that has kind of a tragic history and a lot of environmental concerns, and there's been hundreds of whistleblowers there who have come forward to tell their tale, and I know many of them. So I thought I would kind of write my own version of it, and you mentioned Erin Brockovich. I kind of use that as an inspiration for this book. I call it kind of a mashup of, say, Erin Brockovich meets ghosts. So I kind of turned it into a ghost story, but it's also a true, kind of a cautionary whistleblower tale as well.
Truly, when I read your book, I thought of very first off in the beginning, when you talked about is speaking up, some things going on, and people getting sick. We see this all the time. Here in New Orleans, after the BP oil spill, after the hurricanes, after all of the things go on here, people come up, we have meetings, we talk about their health and everything, and they'll say, show me where it is. Prove to me. Give me your validation. And maybe I'll take it to the person at the top. However, just as in your book, there's a lot of conversation. Don't you think? Am I crazy? Am I losing it? Who's going to come after me? I should say this. I shouldn't say that. Don't you think that's really what goes on in people's heads?
Yeah, it goes on in their heads, but I also think it goes on in reality. I think that, in writing Snitchland, I did a bunch of research, and there's been hundreds of whistleblowers at this nuclear cleanup site, and the stories they tell are either who knows what's actually happened or not, but there's tales of being made to feel like maybe they were crazy and do they need counseling? There's been tales of being followed or have their phones tapped or losing their job or being retaliated against. So I think there's a real fear there because there's actually been real life examples that show that does happen. And my daytime, I've been in human resources for over 25 years, so I see there are employees who just are afraid to come forth because they're afraid of any fear of any harm or retaliation. But when you get the environmental concerns and the government and big money involved, it even gets ever more, I think, frightening for them,
Right, because it's all about your safety and security, just as I shared in the beginning. I mean, I remember
Completely.
here, it was, I think, over 20 years now, having death threats all the time. And I had young children at the time. And I'm going, what am I going to do? How do I handle this? How do I work through this? Because death threats are very real. And you don't know where they come from, how they find you, or where they come out of the woodwork, so to speak. Don't you think?
Yeah, death threats definitely just being followed, but also I think just the fear of just losing your job. I think that people just want to go to work and do good work and provide for their family and do it and be safe in doing so. And sometimes these things that you see, you just turn a blind eye to because you don't want to rock the boat, and you also don't want to be unemployed.
Yeah. But also, too, let's talk about the word snitch in the first place. It's who actually gets through the barrier walls, so to speak. Because everybody can have a conversation at the local bar. Everybody could talk about it over, coffee. They could talk about it at an event, a wedding or a funeral. And you all say, oh, they're drunk. Oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Oh, she's the crazy one. She's always got something to say, And we think about this and we say, are we really taking the stories to heart, or are we giving them an attribute of, well, maybe it's all fiction in the first place?
Well, I think completely. I think, that's what the fear of a lot of whistleblowers is, that they will be deemed a snitch. And so even though they're bringing completely valid concerns about, some life-threatening situations that need to be told, but there are folks who don't want either those stories or those facts brought to the forefront, but they also don't want to rock the boat because people value, the reputation of the company and the jobs that they have and the money they're making and the livelihoods they have. And so you have someone that comes forward to kind of shake things up, even though it's with completely valid and good intentions, they can be deemed as troublemakers and problematic. And that's, I think, where the snitch comes in, the snitch moniker, I'd say.
I could think about it many decades ago. I'm almost 70, so I've got a lot of decades behind you, from you. But I look at it, and people had a job or whatever, and they stayed for a while. But if they went to another job, it wasn't really recorded so that you could find out things, or there weren't databases of information, or there weren't, as we call, trackers. Before the Internet, I know many of my listeners are well familiar with this. Some may not be, but before the Internet, you kind of could be lost pretty easily. It was fairly easy. You just dropped off the map, so to speak, But once you got the Internet, now everybody can, quote, be found, And I think the idea, are there more instances of people speaking out or less since the Internet came out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, the book, Snitchland, is based on, it's a real place. It's my hometown. It's in Richland, Washington. That's why, it's called Richland. And, of course, it's a series of books that all kind of a play on words. I have Snitchland, I have Witchland, I have a new one coming out, Twitchland, and it all kind of tells the story of this real place, which is the home of a multi-billion-dollar nuclear cleanup site for it's a Hanford nuclear reactor, and it's where plutonium was created back in the late 40s and 50s for bombs that were used in World War II, and there's a real troubled history there of people that have been sick because of the toxic nature, and it's been called the most toxic place in North America. So there really are environmental concerns. In fact, there was a lawsuit there called the Downwinders. About 3,000 to 4,000 people joined this lawsuit of folks who were exposed like in the 50s and got really sick. So these are real health concerns. And then you have folks working out there today in the cleanup of it all who are just who get exposed. And so this isn't just someone minor concerns in the workplace. These are life stories of life and death and just wanting to be safe in dealing with this giant, massive cleanup. So to answer your question, I think there are people who throughout the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s who didn't have the internet, like you said, and so really had to meet behind closed doors, and it was all very hush hush and very secret, and it's very easy to be silenced when you brought things up. I think obviously now it's a whole new world where folks are connecting, and there's organizations, and you're getting support, and there's some protections that didn't used to exist for whistleblowers and for to not face retaliation. So it is a different world now, and I think that hopefully folks now are more able and more comfortable coming forward. But and in the people that I've researched and talked to, there's still that fear, especially out at a place like Hanford, where there's so much billions of dollars put into this project that you just kind of want to kind of silence those who question it. So. Yeah.
It's just like here in New Orleans again. Is it okay because they put the cyanide plant right next door to the Monsanto plant? And that's fine. And then they changed the name to that was bought out by Bayer because Bayer aspirin, it's good for you. So in other words, you take it and you switch it around. That which had a kind of story attached to it, and you change it to something else. And then to even think that a cyanide plant would be okay. I don't, in the land of hurricanes here. So it's kind of, what are you willing to buy as a human for the grace of the almighty job, for the grace of the almighty good? Oh, this is your position. This is what you should do. For the grace of government, for the grace of, I wanted to use that plastic bag, so I have to participate and work at the job that has all the components to make the plastic or whatever. And it's just, have we created this illusion of BS and bought it?
Well, yes, I think. And what's interesting about my hometown, it's a beautiful place. I have relatives who live there. I was born and raised there. It's this idyllic, nature on the Columbia River, and it's a great place people think to raise their kids. The people who live there don't talk about the problems there. Like in fact, growing up there, I was never told about the downwinders. I was never told about the dangers of the nuclear reactor. And now it's a fact now that there's this place in particular, there's 52 million gallons of radioactive waste that's buried in the ground that's leaking. And we all know about it because we see it on 60 Minutes or read about it in the New York Times. But the folks who live there, this is their livelihood. They love it there. They don't want to hear it. They just, this is, they like their jobs. They like growing up there. And so I have friends who even question, my series of books. Like, why are you writing these books about your hometown? I'm like, well, they're kind of funny, interesting graphic novels, but based on a real place. But it's no secret of the history there and the events that happened. So I think that people just turn a blind eye, and you don't talk about it when you're there in that community.
Right, absolutely. I think about it all the time, and also too. Let's talk about in your book. You share about the ghosts, and I always think of the ghosts as, because I'm a medium. I also work with many spirits in that space and time. And I can honestly say that they are caught because they didn't want to leave. In other words, they're caught in that middle land. They really didn't ascend, so to speak. because they got caught in the middle, and because they want to stay there for a purpose. They want to stay there to be able to help other people. You know, as you shared in your book, if they keep being the pestering person that says, push that over there, go talk, go do this, go do that, you're not crazy, I'm still here kind of idea, sometimes those people that were wronged in the world tried to make things right in the middle world, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, now you're speaking my language. So I totally agree. I wanted to write this series of books about a real place and based on real, facets of the nuclear reactor world. But then each book kind of throws in a little kind of supernatural element. The first book, Witchland, which was the first book in the series, and now that's a play that's making its rounds across the country. Told the story of kind of the downwinders, but I also talked about a woman in the neighborhood who we always thought was kind of a witch, and that was the lore. The second book, though, right. Snitchland, we're talking about today, is I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the ghosts of Richland and Hanford. All the folks that there's many people who have perished there, and I have relatives who worked out there who have passed away, and in fact, the main couple in Witchland, it's two guys, and one of them passes away due to a workplace accident there, which kind of puts all the events in motion for Snitchland. I thought, well, it'd be really interesting to have that person kind of be the one to say, this accident could have been avoided, and kind of guide the characters through, look here, look here, look here. And in doing so, just realize that the whole town is kind of haunted by ghosts who succumbed, to some of the environmental issues of Hanford. So I had never written a ghost story. It really challenged me to see what, how, kind of what you were talking about with, what the ghosts are there for and what can ghosts do. And it was really kind of opened my eyes to thinking that, for folks who have passed, and especially in our own close life, that hopefully they're around us, and are there watching and can help guide us sometimes in need. And that was my goal with Snitchland, to talk about another environmental story and also describe the plight of the whistleblower, and based on, kind of a bunch of people I talked to and research, but also throw in this ghost story for this family who's gone through tragedy. And to say, we're not going to take it. We're going to move forward and figure out what happened with this situation and how it could have been stopped, and the ghosts help solve the mystery, I'd say.
Yeah, they really do, because they're there because they have another insight. In other words, they're not there to tell you what to do, but they are there to influence, to guide you. It's sort of like if you're going out the door and the door is locked and you can't find your keys, something might move in like your peripheral vision, and you'll glance over and your keys might be next to it, kind of idea. So in other words, they're there to enhance and to guide, the energy around you. If you really think of them as energy workers, you hear a lot of people talking about these days, people with energy workers were energy healers, blah, 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 whatever. And you think about it, they are truly also energy workers because they're shifting the energy. And when you think about it, when you say, to speak up, a lot of times they can push the person to the end where they could say, okay, I'll finally tell them. Here's what I want to tell you, or here's what so-and-so wanted me to let you know. We hear this all the time, as I work with end-of-life patients. They're like, so-and-so wants me to tell you, just go already, or we're going to be okay, or I'll take care of the house, or whatever it might be, There's all of these conversations. So I think the idea is that there's many things at play in your book. There's definitely about those who want to speak up. There's danger in the book about things that shouldn't be here and things that are hidden. And in fact, ghosts are someone who are really hidden, but they're here to help us. So it's kind of like, all of these other phases are at play in your story, yes?
Completely. And, what if those spirits that are around you are, besides there just to kind of be with you and help you, what if they, like in Snitchland, I try to say, what if it's the ghost who brings forth saying, look a little further into this and hold this company, accountable for the accident that caused me to die, So that's the kind of that's what triggers this event, and then you get a whistleblower in there who's a real life whistleblower involved, and then it's kind of showing that there's ghosts all throughout the hospital, the halls of the hospital, in the meeting rooms of the other whistleblowers. Just there's folks who have lived through it, who didn't in the past, who are still with us, even though they've moved on. What if they're all there watching and helping when they can, and sometimes being more active than others in bringing things to the forefront, you know?
Yeah. There's definitely something, too, to be said about when people start to speak up. And they say, oh, but I went to the doctor, and the doctor says I'm okay. I went to the hospital. And, yes, they said they're going to take care of me. And, oh, I never saw a bill. We know that from Aaron Brockovich's story. I know that from working with many patients over the decades. We hear this all the time from people who are deathly ill, where it can't be found. What is wrong with me? Or people who pass on early. I'll tell you, probably the coroner could spill some beans if he ever wrote a book about some of the stuff that really is truly going on. The point is that we are a very secretive society, so to speak, for human preservation. So I think the idea is that, can we preserve our job as a doctor or a medical person? Can we preserve our job so that we can put food on the table? And it really it really changes our life. When we get into that quandary of not having freedom or free will or choice, and we just feel like we're, as I said in the beginning of the show, passing along like zombies, what's the point anymore?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting. When I was in my past in my earlier years, I was an attorney, and I was a young attorney, and I actually was working I went back to my hometown and practiced law for a little while, which I never thought I would do. And I remember back in the late 90s, one of my friend's mothers, who I knew was just kind of this odd woman, wanted to meet with me. And I had to meet her secretly in a park, and she had glasses on and, you know, sunglasses on and a scarf. And I thought, oh, what am I getting into? And she told me this, you know, that she thought her phone was being tapped, and her husband knew these things about Hanford, and she had heard people on the phone, and she thought her son had been followed. And I really just thought she was being crazy. And I kind of blew it all off and told her daughter, God, your mom's have these wacky stories. But then now it's, you know, 20 years later, and I've done my research, and what she described to me is the common thing that many, 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 many people have said. So then it gets to your earlier point, is that sometimes the whistleblower who comes forward isn't taken seriously always. You know, I didn't take her seriously, and I was and I just kind of blew it off as someone who is not, you know, completely there with her facilities. So I think that it takes someone who can really take a leap of faith with that person and believe it and take some action and not worry and not be scared of what the consequences might be. And you have to decide, what do I do with this information, and what's the right entity to take it to. And so it's a tricky thing, you know. But I think that but listening to these folks who have these concerns, you have to distill what's in their mind, what are they exaggerating, and what's really, really, is this happening literally like they say? And if so, what do we do about it, you know?
Well, it really takes a leap of faith to say that there is something more out there that I cannot see, I cannot perceive, I cannot validate, nor is it mine to take on as my truth. It is for me to observe their truth, right? Right.
Yes, completely. Yeah, and my goal with this book was not to, you know, do an expose on the nuclear industry and not to blow the whistle on this company. I was just trying to kind of tell a kind of a fun, interesting take on real things that are happening in this town, and make it, you know, with the beautiful illustrations and the graphic novel, because it does have I think it lends itself well to graphic novel format, because there's intrigue and there's some supernatural aspects, and there's folks who in this country who've never heard of Hanford, and the fact that there's really 52 million gallons of leaking nuclear waste in this small town, and how come I've never heard about it? So I'm kind of using that as a kind of a great impetus to tell these tales and throw a supernatural slant on it, you know?
Yeah. In closing, I think it's very important to be able to say, what are you experiencing? And to be able to be free to share that. You know, a lot of times we get judged as soon as we open our mouth. You know, as soon as something comes out, there's either a clamp put on us or we're filtered down or whatever. You know, I distinctly remember I had this patient in Arizona, and she came to me for acupuncture because she had so much pent-up pain. And then one day she did not know that I was a medium because I didn't share it at that time. But she says, I'm here because I know that I need to be able to tell you something. You know that area, blah, 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 in Arizona? Mm-hmm. She says, let me tell you a story. And she was all ready to start telling me. She says, I know I can trust you. And I think that's what people are really looking for, is someone to be able to hear them. So it's not always that the whistleblower has to carry the staff. It's sometimes how can we create a chain of command to be able to get something done, perhaps?
Yeah, I think completely. I think that, there's one thing about, does the whistleblower really expect that the company is going to completely change their ways, or they're going to go under, all these things are going to happen, or do they just want someone to hear them and believe them and know that what they're saying is true,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think so completely,
When you go to your deathbed and you've got all of these regrets pent up, it's sort of like you've got to unleash them someplace,
Right. Yep. I could have come forward, and I should have done more, and I agree completely.
Right. Well, Tim, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your works?
Yeah, so it's a series of graphic novels. It's called The World of Witchland. There's Witchland, there's Snitchland we're talking about, and the new one is called Twitchland. It's about to come out. There's also a series of plays. All of those are on, I have a website. It's witchlandplay.com, and you can find out all about the graphic novels and the plays there.
Very good. It was a pleasure to have you with us here today to talk about this because, like I said, I've had so many experiences over the decades of this. I can distinctly remember a guy telling me, well, my child has autism, and I'm going, and I said, well, where do you work? And he shows me, his name badge on his cover-up that he wears every day from the company, and he says, well, they take my blood tests all the time, and they're always good. And they take my blood test because it's the company doctor. Yeah, but you have your cover-up that protects you to wear, and you got in your car, and your kid is riding in your car every day, and you just threw the cover-up on the floor. So we go, we need to become smarter human beings, and I think your story is delving into that world. What will happen, and how can you just speak in a casual way, perhaps a fun way, a comic way, or a graphic way, as you did, about speaking up, speaking out about ghosts, about natural disasters, about toxic waste in land, or maybe about how do we get sick in the first place? And I think they all have a purpose, and all your works are definitely concise and very important to breach a conversation, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. I couldn't agree more, yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tim. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It was fun.
If you'd like to find out more information about Tim Mulligan, again, the book is Snitchland, the graphic novel. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page for more information and go to the website with all of his other works. Truly, it's about being able to say, I'm going to take a half an hour or an hour and delve into this little short novel, and I'm going to say, wow, that's interesting. And then you come up with, let me tell you something else. And that's what it's supposed to be about. How can this graphic novel open up a window to be able to bring out of you some of the things, the experiences you've had, perhaps something that you want to say and share with others. Truly, it's about being able to say what is deep inside of us and be able to give it wings. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day. Thanks, Tim.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.